Before we talk about the games of France, do you want to know some facts about the country?
Highlight my month, yes, please.
The French invented tin cans, the hairdryer, and hot air balloons. In France, under certain circumstances, you can legally marry a dead person.
What are those circumstances? Did you research that part?
Yep, as if you had cast iron evidence that they were planning on marrying you, you can then get married to them and then be their spouse. So, like, their will and all the legal stuff then still applies. So
do they have to be at the ceremony? Do they still have to attend?
Yeah, and then they get a little bit of string just to go, hey, yeah!
Just operating them like from under the table like a muppet.
Yeah. Hand right up it.
It's the only way.
It's the only way. Turning a baguette upside down is seen as very unlucky in France.
Is it?
Apparently. The tradition of wearing a white dress at a wedding originated in France over 500 years ago. And of course, it can only be known as a French kiss if it is a tongue-led smooch with an authentic French person. Otherwise, it should technically be known as a sparkling gobslopper.
I was wondering if you were going to try and subvert the champagne joke, if you were going to lead in and lean into the idea that that's what this is all based on, and then somehow go somewhere. But I couldn't think what the new punchline could be to make that work.
Do you know what? Never even occurred to me.
Did it not? You just went straight to French kiss. Well,
yeah. I've only got so much time to R&D these things. What of games, Chris? Tell me of the gaming Frenchman.
Well, our
11th women.
Well, our 11th stop on our world tour is by some margin the most fruitful so far in terms of game development, like obscenely large.
It's almost like we've been picking the countries just to reduce our admin, isn't it?
Like, whilst we were really scraping the edges of the jar, arm fully into the peanut butter barrel, looking for unique titles developed in places like South Africa and Ireland, notable French games are Ten a Penny or 10 centimes. Thanks, GCSE French. Instead of just reeling off hundreds of games and going, it's French, isn't it? I've broken this down into like a few tiers of publishing with some honourable mentions thrown at the end to give a few indie titles a nod as well. Because there's too many. There's just too many. So at the top, Ubisoft. And by parent association...
Ubisoft.
Gameloft as well are industry leaders in the AAA and mobile spaces respectively, and are both headquartered in France, even if they now have a very global span of studios and development houses. Ubisoft's range is stupidly large. If you look at everything they've put their hands to over the years, you have the near annualized open world franchises like Far Cry. What did I say? That's so weird.
Far Cry.
Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, and the Tom Clancy's games. You've got the actually annualized Just Dance. Ubisoft are one of the biggest names in publishing with just an exhaustive list of properties. But you can take Rayman and by extension things like the Mario and Rabbids games. You've got the latter era Driver games were published by Ubisoft. You've got the first two No More Heroes games for something a little bit weirder. You've got the Trials series of 2.5D bike games. You've got the entire Myst series. I didn't realise that outside of the original release. They published everything from Riven onwards. You've got a range of CSI tie-in games. Again, another one I didn't realise, they did the console ports of both Morrowind and Oblivion in the Elder Scrolls series Ubisoft published. They did the Call of Juarez series. They did the Wii-era Pets with a Z, shovelware titles. Like, honestly, the list goes on and on and on. They are a big, big name. Gameloft, as an extension, subsidiary, whatever you want to call it, are similarly ubiquitous in the mobile and occasionally console space as well. So they had hits on iPhones and Android with things like the Asphalt racing franchise, which is now on consoles as well. They made the Halo mimicking Nova series of first-person shooters that was like an early success on the iPhone store as well. They've done 1 billion tie-in games for 1 billion different TV and film franchises. And more recently, something that I played quite a lot of, they also make Disney Dreamlight Valley and also Disney Speedstorm for anyone who gave that one a go. Similar to Ubisoft, not every title is born and bred in France because Gameloft now are stationed all around the globe. But once more, the central hub, or the headquarters at least, are still in Paris. And therefore, by our metric, these are all French games by some sort of heritage.
It's a massive crane fly in my room.
Is it?
Yeah.
it lives there now. Another interesting player in this A tier space is Nacon, a group that seems to be on the up and up as they swoop in and acquire team after team after team and license after license. They are primarily a publisher rather than a developer, but they funded and pushed a range of games over the last few decades, including more recently things like the WRC Rally series, the motorbike sim Rims Racing, recent entries in the Vampire the Masquerade series. They published the recently released Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown that I think came out last week. And they also published the Teon developed Robocop Rogue City as well.
Robocop.
The cop. Can't be stopped. Moving down to the B tier, we have groups like Microids, probably a familiar name to anyone who likes modern adventure games like Siberia or Beneath a Steel Sky. They published the Jack the Ripper and Dracula games. And they also, which is something you will tangentially know, if you're a fan of either Asterix or the Smurfs, basically anything related to them over the last kind of 20 years has been developed and published by Microids. Again, Paris is their home, but their reach extends to several other countries across Europe too. They're very much a European house. I don't think they do much in kind of the Americas or stuff like that, but, they are still global in that sense. Definitely one of those teams that's much bigger and with a greater sphere of industry reach than you might think glancing at their logo, because it pops up all the time, but you don't really realise just how often it pops up. On a similar level, Focus Entertainment are also Parisian neighbours of Microids, Ubisoft and Gameloft. They were responsible for earlier entries in the Farming Simulator series, for Trackmania, for the Spin Tires, open world driving games Mud and SnowRunner, all of the modern Sherlock Holmes adventure games, they all come from there as well. Dropping down to the C tier, we're hitting up the duo of Spiders and Delphine Software. Spiders are best known for pumping out B-tier action role-playing games like Bound by Flame or Greedfall or Technomancer. Generally well liked by those that like them and shrugged off by everyone else, but they must have a pretty decent audience because the games keep getting made. So they keep on coming. Delphine, on the other hand, are long since deceased, but I wanted to give them a nod for the groundwork that they put into the cinematic platformer genre because they are responsible for Flashback and Another World and a few other kind of notable games from the early kind of 90s and things like that. A grab bag to finish, literally skimming game titles from a list as long as all of our collective arms. Absolver and Sifu come from Slow Clap, which is French developed. Arcane Studios games like Dishonored and Deathloop before they were shut down very recently. French. Nervous Breakdown and Big Bang Mini, 2 DS games that I really liked, both from Arcado Games, French, and the entire Alone in the Dark franchise as well, all born and raised in Paris. Well, France, but most of them in Paris, if we're being honest. Honestly, we could do 20 episodes on France alone and not even scratch the surface of this stuff.